Oh, goodness gracious.
She's done baptism. Yeah, she's done baptism.
What do you think about what's going on with Shooter? What's the coach trying to do with Shooter?
Give him back a life.
He's trying to do what?
Give him back a life.
Give him back his life?
He's trying to reconcile him and his son. But he also knows where Shooter came from because he was there. He'd been there.
How do you mean?
Well, Shooter, he had been down and out, and Shooter is down and out.
Right.
So he's trying to give him the chance that somebody's given him. He's giving him a leg up.
Right. Yeah.
Hand up, whatever you want to call it.
Yep.
He saw his talent too, I think, which other people probably didn't. Or they.
It's risky, for sure. Of course, this is taking place in 1951.
And it's Hollywood.
And and it's Hollywood. And they didn't. I don't think they knew or quite understood alcoholism the way we do now. And it was inevitable that. Well, it will be inevitable that Shooter can't hack it. But I don't think that changes what Coach Dale was trying to do in terms of leadership. And he must have known, don't you think, that the rest of the town would just be up in arms about it. I don't know. But this is the climax of the movie. We've just seen the climax. The conflict has come to a head, and the straw that broke the camel's back is recruiting Shooter.
He could be trying too to help the kid, maybe get a little more respect for his dad, and show him that you've got to give somebody a second chance.
Right. Yep. So we learn about Coach Dale's past. We knew he had one. Now we know what it is. And Myra Fleener, I don't know what to make of her sometimes. As many times as I've watched this movie, she has some sort of, there's a conflict in her between her goals for Jimmy and her relationship with Coach Dale. And she's in this weird position where her character, the character is so fixated on possessing Jimmy and rescuing him from the evils of basketball that it overpowers her growing what's the word I'm not going to say she loves him yet, but she likes him. She clearly, we've seen that she is well, and she sees what he's doing. I mean, we've been given enough clues that we've seen that she knows Coach Dale is his motives are pure, and yet she's still driven by her.
Not like the town, just out to win basketball games.
Right.
He's out to teach the kids something.
Yep.
About teammanship.
In 1951, for her to be educated, single, now assistant acting principal, that's pretty heavy stuff.
For 1951.
In an agricultural.
Yeah, I agree.
She's got other stuff going on.
Right, that's true. That's fair. I mean, yeah, she's got a lot going on, a lot of conflicting responsibilities, or her sense of responsibilities.
And she's single and they're finding a likely candidate
Right.
in the community.
Right, right, yeah, exactly.
She has a mothering instinct on Jimmy.
Well, no, that's part of it.
Yeah.
She's
Yep. Now, before I talk about Jimmy, I want to do my best to try to diagram or illustrate why this class is about leadership, and why leadership has very little to do with hierarchy and has much more to do with our position in a system, an emotional position within a system. Because everything affects everything. And the simplest way to describe this, to diagram it, is to think about filling a glass with water. So we start with someone who has a desired water level in mind. And this desire influences the faucet position. And the faucet position influences water flow. And the water flow influences the water level. And the water level influences the person looking at it. You thought filling a glass with water was pretty straightforward. And so we could ask, is the person controlling the water level, or is the water level controlling the person? You see what I'm saying? So that each of these influence everything. But what we tend to do is we act linearly. Causation. So I want to fill a glass with water, so I fill the glass with water. And I end up with a full glass of water. But human relationships are more like this, and really not like this at all. Really not at all. Human relationships, however, are really complicated. There isn't an easy way to diagram it, but that won't stop me from trying. So, A, B, C, D, E. And so, excuse me, this. And we have that's pretty complicated. That's what a human system kind of looks like. And the principle that I'm trying to get across is that in an emotional system, if you try to change somebody else, you'll end up with a lesson in physics. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction. Okay? I think I've said this before. So you try to change whatever, you try to change your spouse, you try to change your kid, you try to change someone at work, all you get is nothing. You get resistance. The only way to change a system is to look at yourself. So within this system, we've got Myra Fleener and Jimmy, along with everybody else. Myra Fleener has some positional authority, and I mean, I should say not positional, hierarchical authority. So there is some influence that she has, but even those, when I teach this to clergy, and it's been a long time since I've been invited to do it, when I teach this to clergy, I say, canon law may say that you can do this, this, and this, but if you just start doing it, you're going to find out really quickly whether you can, in fact, do this, this, and this. It's the difference between authority and power. So if that tree out there, if I want to cut it down, the chainsaw is the power. I have the power to cut down the tree. But the moment I cut down the tree, I'm going to find out whether I had the authority to cut down the tree. Okay? So what has been happening with Jimmy? Within this system, Jimmy has been seeing himself as a pawn. I mean, he to the extent that he even thinks about it, he has no power. He's trying to please Myra. He can't please the town because he's going to upset Myra Fleener, and yet he loves basketball. So he feels like, I don't know what he feels like. It must just feel awful to do it. But he has a kind of awakening when Coach Dale talks to him earlier in the movie. A seed is planted, if you will. And if you look back, think back about it, all Coach Dale did was say, I, Coach Dale, am going to do this. And what I'm going to do is, I don't care whether you play basketball or not. And he walks away. Coach Dale is not interested in changing Jimmy. But in going to Jimmy and sort of trying to create some connection with him, remaining well-defined as himself. I'm the coach, I have my goals in mind, and you're invited. That's the implicit message. You're invited to join me in these goals, but I don't care whether you do or you don't. Myra Fleener, on the other hand, is trying to change Jimmy. The men and the people in the town are trying to change Jimmy. And in terms of hierarchy, Jimmy has nothing. He has no authority whatsoever. But what happens?
He has authority.
He has authority. He wakes up to the fact that he has his position in the system is such that he has a whole lot of both power and he doesn't have authority, but he has power. He has a great deal of power. And he puts it right on the line. And he changes the whole system. The whole system is changed simply because Jimmy said, I play, coach stays. He goes, I go. Boom. Myra Fleener, for her part, she also wakes up and comes to that podium and could have destroyed Coach Dale's career right then and right there. Right, with that letter, but she doesn't. Now she, in terms of the emotional system, we've got all kinds of things going on. It's 1951, as you pointed out. She just doesn't carry that kind of emotional weight and to change the whole system. But I think it's fair to say that all of this is working together to allow the system to change. But if you try to change other people, you're not going to get you're just not going to get very far. And I think that this has been what's been going on in the movie. At this point, from this point forward, our lessons in leadership are done. There are no other lessons that are gleaned from the movie about leadership. Everything has been leading up to this moment. And from here on in, all the pistons are firing and everything's working, and you know how it ends. They end up in the state championship. So that's why, you're an altar guild, you're a Sunday school teacher, if all of us can learn to know who we are, know what our values are, and to know and keep, stay in touch with those ourselves, so that when things come at us from the outside, pressuring us to do whatever, or think whatever, or say whatever, you go, well, wait a minute. This is who I am, this is what I'm about, and so, yes, I'll do that, no, I won't. I mean, this is as basic as learning to say no, so that you don't feel overwhelmed. Every time someone asks you to do something, you don't want to say no because you're afraid of hurting people's feelings, and so you say yes, and you end up resenting everyone because...
You said yes.
And whose fault is that? Your own. Your own. Your own. Because you haven't taken responsibility for yourself. And another example. In my former congregation, we got to this weird point where some people weren't donating money for flowers on Sunday morning. And so one of the women in the parish who loved the garden said, well, she's very upset that people aren't signing up for the flowers. And I said, well, other than asking people, what do you suggest? And she said, well, I'm going to take care of it. I said, I really hope you don't do that. Why? I said, because you're rescuing the congregation from the responsibility that is in fact theirs. If you do it all the time, then everyone will go, oh, there's just flowers on the altar all the time. I don't have any responsibility. But if you don't rescue them and let the altar be bare, so what if it's bare? If people don't like that it's bare, there's a solution. Donate to the altar, to the flower fund. Okay? So that's an example of where leadership can make all the difference in the world. Instead of doing things for everybody else, you say, wait a minute, what's mine and what's yours? Well, the flowers on the altar are not all mine. If I want to have a Sunday for flowers, that's mine, but it's not my responsibility to have flowers to make sure that there are flowers on the altar every single week. That's something that's shared by everybody else. And if you just take care of yourself and know who you are, you might end up changing the whole congregation because you stopped rescuing them and let them experience the consequences of their own decisions. I mean, this is parenting 101, okay? Parenting 101. Sooner or later, parents have to sort of cut the umbilical cord and let their children go out and experience the world. And yeah, they're going to make mistakes. And yes, they're probably going to get hurt. Hopefully not a lot. But something will, either their feelings will get hurt because of relationships, or they'll fall off their swing set, or whatever. But you can't rescue them all the time. People have to learn to live in the world. But you can't do it by saying to, like little Jimmy, your child, now, Jimmy, don't get hurt.
That works.
Yeah, right. Don't do anything that you're going to get hurt. You can't live it. You can't live that way, and that's not going to change your child. What's going to change your child is when they experience life. Nick, when he was really, I don't know if I already told this story, but Nick, when he was really, really young, Carolyn and I had just gotten married, so this was 1993, and Nick was born in 1991. So he was 2 or 3 at most. We had a lamp in the living room, and it was one of those lamps from back in the day when they were halogen bulbs, and it was a torch, okay, up here, but then it had this arm that came out for reading, but it was also halogen. And those bulbs are protected by, it was protected by this sort of U-shaped piece of glass. that covered the bulb. But other than that, it was there. And that sucker got hot. I mean, really hot. And I see Nick walking up to that lamp, and he is looking right at me. Like, what does he think I'm going to tell him? And I'm having an existential crisis in this moment. What is the right thing to do as a parent? Do I rescue him? Or do I look at it and I say, Nick, don't touch it. So that's what I did. I said, don't touch it. That's exactly what he did. And, so what he ended up with is a blister on his finger, and that's it. But a lesson that was going to be learned for the rest of his life. And
Yes.
yeah, but it's still like it was this crisis and moment. It's like, it's one thing when your children get hurt and you're not there to witness it. It's another thing when you're sort of watching it. Now, if it had been the stove, I would have picked him up and scooped him up in a heartbeat. Okay, I knew that the worst that was going to happen was he was going to get a blister on the end of his finger, and I thought, okay, the lesson's worth that. And and that's a lesson that or a way of dealing with my kids that I continued into their adolescence. Okay? Yeah.
Well, ever since we started doing this, I've been wrestling with the idea that as I age, the roles are going to be reversed, and how do my kids deal with me? Or we have a friend who shouldn't be driving, and it's his responsibility not to drive.
Right.
But he wants us to go in the car with him.
Right.
It's like the reverse of all of that, because the roles are going to be exactly the opposite, particularly if it's our children. If my kid says, okay, Mom, it's time to take the key.
Right. And that, so I faced that kind of question with my mom.
Yeah.
And so, this is how I answer that question. This is how I dealt with it. This isn't a right or wrong. It's just the way I dealt with it. And fortunately, my brother and I are both, we love each other, we have a good relationship, and we're both very well educated. He's a neuroradiologist and I'm a priest, and so we have this knack of approaching problems in a very, very similar way. And when we realized that Mom was really getting to a point where it was unsafe for her to drive anymore, the person that we had to work on wasn't her, but my father, who didn't have the heart to just take the keys away. So we made an appointment with her doctor, and all of us went. And this doctor didn't know we were coming. And we were with this doctor for at least 2 hours. I don't know what she did with the rest of her patients, because she spent nearly all of that time with us. And by the time it was all done, Dad knew that he had no choice but to take those keys. Except that he didn't right away. And she got in the car and she drove to Publix, the grocery store down the road. And fortunately, it's even less than a half a mile away. And we found her very, very quickly. But now I had sort of this history where everything's been explained to him, and I said to Dad, you gotta suck it up and deal with Mom, who's gonna yell at you, okay? You're just gonna have to deal with it. Because you cannot let her drive. Cannot. And he took the keys and hit him. And he dealt with her, getting upset. And so that's how I dealt with it. If I were an elderly person whose friends with also someone who's, relatively the same age, but their driving is kind of worrisome. I'm not sure what I would like to think that what I would do is say, well, I'm not getting in the car with you. I don't feel safe when you drive. I'm sorry, but I don't. So you do what you got to do. I'll meet you at the restaurant some other way. But I'd like to think that that's what I would do. I can tell you that I've gotten in the car with an elderly person once, and to my defense, I didn't know how bad of a driver this guy was. I was kind of afraid for my life. And I said to myself, well, that's the last time I'm going to do that. I'm not going to get into a car with him. So I don't know. And when it comes to our, the reversal of roles, so that the elderly need to be cared for by their children, that's a really, really tough one. And there is no simple, easy answer to that. I think that children have to do an assessment of what they can do versus what they feel they ought to do. And what I mean is like if you have 4 kids and 2 jobs and not enough money to pay for in-home health care, you try to take on all of the care for your parent. Can you do that? Can you? I mean, I know you want to. I know you feel you should, but can you? And that's a tough question. And asking a parent to move into a nursing home, and that's a very, very tough question. And I think that assessing what's mine and what's theirs, what's mine is my love for my father, and that love says that I should tell him what I think. So I will say, this is hypothetical because my dad's not in this kind of position, but I would say, Dad, I don't think you can take care of yourself anymore. And here's why. This has happened, okay? To help him understand that he can't take care of himself anymore. And as difficult as it is, it's time to move into a assisted living. Because Kevin can't do it. His work, he's working 12 hours a day as it is. Nandita can't do it because she's also working 10 and 12 hours a day. They have 2 kids who are young. I mean, my kids are grown, adult, and married. My nephew is 13. Okay? So, yeah, I mean, so they can't do it. I live in Massachusetts. How am I supposed to do it? I can't do it. So I can tell him what I think is happening and try to get him to take responsibility for it and do something about it. And this is all assuming that his mental faculties are sufficient for him to be able to make that kind of decision. If they're not, then he is my responsibility, and I have to make the decisions for him.
And it's deciding which of those is
right.
Part of the problem for the other.
Right, and so in my case, I still find it difficult how I could even bring Dad up to Massachusetts and take care of him, because we're not at home. Carolyn and I both are, we have other commitments and obligations, and we can't afford in-home health care. We can't do that for him.
Unless you ask us for a raise.
Huh? Yeah. Well, this church has given me a raise, and I'm very, very grateful for that. And but that's just not where I'm coming from. So I guess the thing I'm trying to say is that sorting out what belongs to whom isn't easy, and sometimes it's gray.
And it changes, and you got to be
right. And in these very, very difficult situations that we're talking about now, I think that we need to gather as much, lean on the experience of other people. What other decisions are people making, that kind of thing. What have they done in these kind of situations, and try to make the best decision that you can. Huh? Yes, because I have a baptism and I need to meet with the family and go with that. So, okay, that's it.